Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, Wisconsin is sitting at 500 in Big Ten play after going on the road last night, beating Rutgers. It was the first time the Scarlet Knights had lost at home this year. It was the Badgers' first true road win since last January. It was also Wisconsin's fourth straight win this year, which also just happened to coincide with senior big man Steven Crowell finding his footing. Got off to a slow start this year, but since having no rebounds in a loss at Illinois, averaging 16.3 points and 6.8 rebounds per game over the last four contests, Coach Greg Gard said there was a reason for it.
Steve is best when he's aggressive. And I think the last four games, we've tweaked how we sub him in and out a little bit. I think it's helped him, but he knows an aggressive Steve is the best Steve. And, he was big for us, especially down the stretch, both ends off the backboard, that he got us some key offensive rebounds, finished some plays, and then was able to gobble up some defensive rebounds there at the end too for us to seal it away.
Wisconsin back in action when they host Minnesota on Friday. The Bucks cruised to an easy win last night in Toronto. They'll be back at home tomorrow to host the Spurs.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Farmers a lot, including long days, stress, and fatigue. This is your reminder to take breaks, stretch, have a snack, and hydrate your body. Avoid farm accidents by keeping yourself healthy. Visit ruralmutual.com to learn how Rural Mutual supports Wisconsin farmers and prioritize safety on the farm.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, injury is going to be something to watch for the Packers and Eagles this week as they prep for Sunday's wild card game. Green Bay going to be without Christian Watson and Jair Alexander due to season-ending injuries, while the statuses of Quay Walker and Evan Williams going to be watched closely. Philly quarterback Jalen Hurts remained in the concussion protocol as of yesterday. Missed the last two games. Kick on Sundays at 3:30. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Print.
A disappointing finish, disappointing loss. It's the same thing. There's a lot of areas that we can clean up and we got to be better in. And the same kind of messages going through that locker room is, we got to go out there and make these plays and execute. We just have to be better.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
I'm very excited for the NFL playoffs. It's going to be a really fun year. We're always excited for the NFL playoffs, but this time of year does kind of stink in that we lose Thursday night football. Last night, we were without Monday night football. No Joe, no Troy, no America's Booth. Real lack of patriotism last night. And I loved watching Wisconsin. They beat Rutgers, and what an awesome win. We're going to talk about that. And if you're watching on the live stream, the show began with a bold Greg Gargage. I mean, that thing is locked in to the right side. Last night was a tough night for the Fire Guard crowd. And it was nice. So I enjoyed watching basketball. I watched a little bit of the Bucks game last night too. By the time the Badger game was over, the Bucks game was like a 20-point game. I was like, well, I'm not going to watch this. I'm going to play Call of Duty. Sorry, Bucks. I'm not watching a blowout. Just not going to do it. So there was plenty to watch last night. Man, as soon as you start to lose NFL games, you don't have Red Zone on Sundays, you don't have Thursday night, you don't have Monday night, you really realize how the NFL, as much as it's an entertainment product and it's content for us, it helps you get through the work week. And when you lose Monday and Thursday and you really start to have limited numbers of games on weekend, you don't have that full, robust noon slate, no Red Zone for those of you that like watching Red Zone. You really realize, damn, that kind of gets you through the work week. You come home from work on a Monday night like, oh, God, the week is just getting started. But at least there's a game on tonight. And I love watching college basketball. The Badgers last night and the Bucks, but it's just not the same. So it's a little bittersweet. Excited for the postseason to start. I want to talk about Packers-Eagles to begin tonight's show. But you start to lose those markers, those signposts that get you through the work week, especially this time of year when it's dark and cold. This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Bit of a loaded show this evening. I don't like to throw that word around. A classic two-guest Tuesday tonight. Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports, going to join us to talk college basketball and Badgers. Huge win last night at the Rack. Really impressive. And, because it was a big weekend for the Packers and a lot of football, we didn't even mention, but the Badgers scored 116 points on Fran McCaffrey's head on Friday night. That was fun. So talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about Rutgers and college football, big picture, because that's technically Isaac's job. Isaac, he knows every player on every team, but he's their national columnist or national writer, journalist, analyst, whatever, who knows with the media sphere today at 24/7 Sports, but he knows everything about every team, and I love the guy. We previewed the season with him a couple weeks back. Nice to have him back. You'll hear the conversation that I recorded with him earlier this afternoon at 4:30. Mike Clemens will be here at 5:30 with the latest from Green Bay. The Packers are idle today, so they'll be back in action tomorrow, back on the practice field, and we'll have the media in the locker room and speaking with the coaches as well. But Mike Clemens excited to get the latest as we prepare for the Eagles coming up on Sunday afternoon. 608-321-1670. I'll take some of your calls here after segment number 1 before we get to Isaac, if you have any Packers thoughts. And you can comment on the live stream as well, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I woke up this morning and I did the same thing that I do every day. I grab my phone and I go to Twitter. What's taken place? What's gone on? What have I missed in the sports world, but also just in the world? I guess we're trying to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America now. So that was it. That was an interesting thing to see on Twitter today. Normally just see sports stuff, but every once in a while see news as well. And I saw this breakout clip from Cheesehead TV from Aaron Nagler. And he had this, I wouldn't call it a rant, but he had this monologue, I guess, about how Packers fans have gone a little overboard, criticizing Matt LaFleur, criticizing Brian Gutekunst. And he basically was saying it is nuts to argue or to think that either one of those two should be on the hot seat. Certainly nuts to think that they should be out of a job. Okay, now I think it's nuts to say that both of those people should be out of a job too. But the more I listen to Packers fans and, the more calls we take on the Bill Michaels show and on this show, and, the more of this Packers team that I watch and the more that I interact with fans, the more I get the Matt LaFleur critiques. I throughout this season, every football season, there seems to be a theme, something that I talk about or something that I harp on, something that I really hammer. This season, I feel like I have been defending coaches. I've been the defend coach guy because I think a lot of fan critiques of coaches is unfair. Play calling. Oh, it's a horrible play call. Well, would you think that if it worked? Was it executed well? Football's a lot more complex than a good or a bad play call or a fourth down decision to go for it or to kick a field goal or to punt. I think we play the results. Why would it take in the points? Well, is that because they didn't pick up the first down and they turned it over on downs? Or do you really believe they should have kicked a field goal there? It's tough. So a lot of critiques of coaches, I often don't agree with. But the more we talk about Matt LaFleur and the more that we talk about this Packers team, the more that I understand criticism that's been levied by Packers fans. I still think LaFleur's a good coach. And I think they could do way worse. Like, let me be clear. I'm not saying that I would start to look elsewhere. I'm not saying that he should even be on the hot seat. And I know, Tony from Texas mentioned yesterday, like, wow, Matt LaFleur is going to really, really have a lot of pressure next year for this team to take another step. I agree, but that's true of every coach. This is the NFL. There's no coach in football other than maybe Andy Reid and Sean McVay, who I think are the gold standard in each conference. There's no coach anywhere other than maybe those two where the front office and the media and the fans are like, man, even if he has 2 or 3 bad years, I still believe in the guy. Like, no, you're only as good as your most recent season. So to say, well, Matt LaFleur is going to have a lot of pressure next year, that's true of every coach. That's not really revelatory. That's just the nature of the sport, the nature of football. But I've heard a lot of critiques of Matt LaFleur recently, and, I try to push back and play devil's advocate because that's kind of the job too, but also I'm starting to understand it. I want to play you 2 comments here from Peter Bukowski, Locked on Packers, who I thought had one of the finest appearances of any guest during this season on the Bill Michaels show earlier today. He was outstanding. So I would recommend that you go listen to that. It's hour number 1. It's at 10:30. So about halfway through the first hour of the Bill Michaels show podcast, or you can go back and rewind the live stream if you watch on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. So I would go listen to the whole thing, but I cut out 2 rants that Peter went on. First, and this is at the very beginning of the interview when Bill, and I don't remember exactly the question that Bill asked, but Bill was basically like, yeah, a lot of people have had doubts or critiques of the job that Matt LaFleur has done, especially the last couple of weeks. Matt LaFleur said we came out flat against Minnesota. How does that happen? So here's Peter Bukowski from earlier today talking about how this team can be a little front-runnerish. Take a listen to this.
I do think this team is a little bit of a front runner. I think when they start fast early, it's really, really a positive thing. You go back to that Detroit game last year on Thanksgiving. They come out first play of the game. They hit that shot play to Christian Watson. They score a touchdown. You could just feel they were off and running after that. Mm-hmm. This year, they haven't had those fast starts early in games, and it's been a tick here. It's Josh Jacobs fumbling the ball. It's these little things just off in their calibration. And I think, and I said this on Locked On Packers today, I think they are so close, Bill, to catching that lightning because we know they're capable of doing it. Here's the flip side of that, though, and where I will agree with you. This is partially a Matt LaFleur problem. Go back to 2019. We remember Mike Pettine's defense getting steamrolled by the 49ers. Do you remember how many points the Packers scored in the first half of that 49ers game in the NFC Championship game? 0.
Yeah.
Not a 1.
Yep.
And then against Tampa Bay in the NFC Championship game the next year, they're down 21-10 at halftime. The offense didn't get their butts in gear until the second half. This slow start thing is partially now, at this point, it's on Matt LaFleur to get these guys. I don't know if he's a little tight. He said, I couldn't believe this. I don't know if you heard at halftime, he was asked about the slow start of the Vikings game. And he said, we played tight.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a reflection of the coach and the leadership. And I think you can't say it's a young team thing because the 2019 team was not young. The 2020 team was not young. Those were veteran teams, and they came out tight. So this is if Matt LaFleur wants to be in that pantheon of coaches right now, since 2019, no NFC team has won as many games as the Green Bay Packers, but that's regular season games. You want to be one of the hallowed coaches. You want to make sure you're not left off of any of those stupid top 5 lists that you and I have to talk about every offseason. Right. Then you need to, in these big games, if you lose 35-31, but you went toe-to-toe from the jump with one of these teams, I don't think anyone's going to complain. Like this Eagles team is really good. This Lions and Vikings teams, those teams are really good, but look like you belong on the field with them for 4 quarters.
So I think that's a great 2 minutes from Pete. Again, I thought his appearance earlier on Bill's show, I thought it was one of the best interviews that had taken place on Bill's show this season. I've listened to them all because I sit here, I'm producing. I'll add a data point of my own onto Pete's. Let me pile on a little bit. We hear so many comments from Packers players. Tucker Kraft, it feels like he says this every week. Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs. Anytime that Mike Clemens gets us interview audio from Wednesday when they open up the locker room and we play these cuts and, maybe we play a full conversation that's a couple minutes, or I play a comment coming back from a break, going into a bumper song. You can just tell that in that building they preach, we want to start fast. We want to get out to a lead. We want to take the ball and go score. We want it. That's so clearly what's being preached in the locker room. That's so clearly the message from Matt LaFleur. And I think it's a great message, by the way. I don't think any team in the NFL is like, starting fast. We don't need to do that. Everyone would love to start fast. Every single team would love to start fast. What I've pointed out the last week or two, and I think I was talking about this with a caller last night. I don't remember which one because we had a busy show with callers last night reacting to Sunday's loss to the Bears. But something that I said was, when this team doesn't start fast, like against the Vikings, I thought they came out and they were actually executing at a pretty high level against the Vikings. Josh Jacobs just fumbled. And then Jaden Reed dropped a 4th down pass that wasn't a great pass, and they had to settle for a field goal on another possession. When they come out and they're not able to start fast, from a scoring perspective at least, when they're not able to jump out to that early lead, I think they kind of panic. They go, oh boy, we didn't do the thing that we always say that we're going to do. We weren't able to start the game the way that we said we need to start, and I think they get a little freaked out. Right? Even if it's a 3-0 game, even if it's a 7-3 game, or even if it's a 7-7 game, when this team can't get out to a start, can't get out to a lead, I think they panic a little bit. And I just don't like that my team seemingly only has one path to victory. Right? I don't like that my team seemingly can't win if they don't get off to an awesome start, because these games are 4 quarters long and we see deficits. We see comebacks every single week. Right, with the way that these teams can throw the ball around, and Jordan Love especially, right, can create these big plays. He's often categorized, I think, correctly by the eye test and the data as a big game hunting quarterback. They like to hunt big plays in this offense, especially when Christian Watson's healthy. They can come back. They have the facilities. They have the weapons. They have the O-line to pass block. They're a tremendous pass blocking O-line. But I think when they can't get off to a fast start, they freak out. Because Matt LaFleur just drills into them. We got to start fast. We got to start fast. We got to start fast. And then when they don't start fast, they don't know how to react. They don't know how to respond. I think we saw that against Minnesota. I think we definitely saw that against Chicago, right? It was like 7-3. And the Packers easily could have said, okay, but we still got this. And yet they seemingly didn't act as though they still had it, right? One more question and answer I want to play for you from Pete's hit earlier today. Remember this comment from Xavier McKinney when he was asked after the game. What did you and Rashawn Gary say to the team in the locker room? I'm going to play you this cut because this is the cut that Bill asks Peter to respond to.
I'm gonna keep that in house.
Okay.
Yeah, I ain't gonna speak too much on that.
Confidence that you guys can do that.
Just the way the way we go out there and prepare, like we prepare throughout the week. And I know these guys. Like at this point, I know that a lot of these guys personally, really everybody personally, and I know what they're built of. I know how competitive we are as a team, as individuals. So I know that we're here now, so we don't got no choice but to flip the switch. But everybody's ready to flip the switch, and they know that we got one opportunity, we got one chance. Yeah, that's what it is. So I got complete trust in these guys. I'm confident in everybody, including myself, to be able to really lock in on what we need to do, and that's to go out there and win a playoff game.
So Xavier McKinney at the beginning of that answer talks about preparation and practice and winning Wednesday through Friday, as Bill has talked about this week, right? You don't win the game necessarily always on Sunday. Sometimes the battle is won long before the first bullet is ever fired. You've heard that explanation. I like the expression, if you give me 5 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 4 sharpening my axe, right? So the work that is done during the week at practice, the attention to detail Monday through Friday in the facility, that's so important. So Bill asked Peter about this comment. This was Peter's response. Again, I thought Peter just killed it on Bill's show earlier today.
It's both of those things. And I was floored when I heard Tom Brady a couple weeks ago describe the Packers' intermediate passing game as lacking details. I was like, Tom, of all people to say that, Tom Brady, like the one time he's going to be critical. And this is the thing. And it's a very nuanced thing, right? It's not a detailed intermediate passing game. That's a coaching issue. That's a player's issue. That's a personnel issue. That's everything. And it's true. And I do think it is reflective of a young team, but that's in part a personnel problem, right? If you're having these guys constantly making mistakes and guys you can't rely on, then you need to get some guys in there that you can rely on, or you need to get some coaches that are going to do a better job of getting these guys prepared. That is damning to me. And I think there's a reason why we're seeing an aesthetic difference. Like if you look at all the numbers, Bill, this offense is better than last year. But if I just asked you without those numbers, is this offense this year better than last year? You'd say no, right?
Nope.
Like no way.
Right.
But it is. By every efficiency number, adjust for garbage time, do whatever you want to do. This offense is better.
So I'm glad Peter brought that up, that last part, because that was something that I was going to hit last night we didn't get to. If you look at whatever spaghetti ABC XYZ stats you can find, EPA per play, all of those numbers, those holistic numbers that take into account yardage and they boil it all down to a number that categorizes the offense. All of those numbers would tell you that the Packers offense is better this year than they were last year. And yet it looks more herky-jerky. They haven't scored. They haven't started games well. And they're fumbling. They're not executing. They're making mistakes. And this is why I bring this up. I was going to bring this up last night. If all of the big picture numbers are telling us that the offense is better this year than last year, then I think that's a coaching problem. For example, if you had money invested in the stock market through a financial advisor, if you had a person at, I don't know, Edward Jones or H&R Block his taxes, but you know what I mean, right? If you had someone managing your investments, right? They're taking a certain percentage every paycheck and they're putting it into the stock market, mutual funds, whatever. And the person who's advising you, who's handling your money, sits you down and say, man, the stock market is up. Look at these averages. Everything is up. Everything's in a better spot this year than last year or than 2 years or 3 years ago. The markets are doing great. Our economy's healthy. Everything's going great. But your personal investments they've gotten a little worse or they're only staying the same. Well, then I would start to ask the advisor, well, you must be messing something up. You are botching the little details. You're botching the execution. Because if all the big picture numbers are telling me that we're better now than we were a year ago, but the actual results aren't bearing that out, well, then it's a coaching issue. Then it's a financial advisor issue, right? Then it's the man on the joystick. It's the man at the wheel. It's the man calling the plays and leading practice. So I think Matt LaFleur is a very good coach. I think he's one of the better. He's certainly in the top half of the league. But the more I talk with Packers fans and the more we pour over the data and the more we listen to players' comments, the more we just consume, the more I grow concerned about, these little things or these trends that I think are actually costing them in big games against really good teams. And we've certainly seen that borne out in the results or bored out in the results or played out in the results this year. If you have thoughts on this, I'll take your call next. 608-321-1670. And then we're going to talk a little college basketball at 4:35 with Isaac Trotter.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
There's a reason why we're seeing an aesthetic difference. Like if you look at all the numbers, Bill, this offense is better than last year. But if I just asked you without those numbers, is this offense this year better than last year? You'd say no, right?
Nope.
Like no way.
Right.
But it is. By every efficiency number, adjust for garbage time, do whatever you want to do. This offense is better.
I love that comment. That's Peter Bukowski earlier on Bill's show. And it was something that I was going to bring up last night. We just didn't get to it. Ran out of time and we were taking a lot of calls, which I'd rather take calls, especially the day after a game. But all the big picture numbers, EPA per play, efficiency, all the big picture stats that account for everything, the whole shooting match, would tell us that the Packers offense is better this year than last year. And yet the results haven't been. And the analogy that I use to kind of put this into perspective, right? If you were investing your retirement or you were putting money in the stock market and you were using a financial advisor, right? Someone at Edward Jones or, one of the fiduciaries or whatever they're called. I don't know. I don't know finance. If your advisor told you, Grant or whatever, fill in your name, The market is great. The market's up. All the numbers are up. The Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500. I think those are things. They're all up from last year. Financially, our country, our system is doing great. Now, your numbers are pretty stagnant, or they might actually be a little worse, but big picture, we're doing great. Well, then I'd say, then I think that's a you problem then. If the whole apparatus has gotten better, but our results have stayed the same or gotten worse, then that's the man on the trigger. So that's kind of my feeling about Matt LaFleur, who I really like. But with attention to detail and preparation and how he's had his team riled up or not riled up in certain spots, I don't know that Matt LaFleur has been the best this year in the biggest games. And for all the Packers fans who we talk to on all our shows, and I see all the tweets, who have real frustrations with him, I get it. And I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. I think he does a lot of good things as well. He's also in his fifth or sixth year. It's not like he's new to this. Like there's some of these issues, the clock. Oh my goodness. Like we just shouldn't be having these issues 5 or 6 years into a head coaching career. 608-321-1670. We got time for 3 calls. Then we're going to get to Isaac Trotter, talk college basketball, 24/7 sports. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, Clemhead, Mike.
Clemhead, good evening. How are you?
How are you doing?
I'm doing
good.
I'm doing good.
Was it you or Bill that texted me right exactly at 2 p.m. today?
It was probably Bill. I don't think I texted you at 2. So it must have been Bill responding to the text line.
Yeah, he liked my text. He LOL'd and said that was a good one. I said, I texted him and said, Bill, Satan called, and he asked the Philadelphia fans to tone it down a little bit, tone down the evil just a little.
Just a bit. So, they're a bit strong. Yeah. I wonder, I think Packers and Eagles fans are actually in a similar spot this week, and they've both had big picture pretty great seasons, but with one bad lot, and the Packers have had a couple bad losses to contenders, but with a loss this week, and I think Eagles and Packers fans, both fan bases are going to be pretty displeased going into the offseason.
Yeah, so all of our Packer friends out there, just be careful when you go to Philadelphia. Okay, those people are animals.
Don't pick a fight. Don't be brash. Fit in. I think that's such a big part of going to road games. You got to understand that you're behind enemy lines. You got to tread lightly.
Yeah, avoid eye contact. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think Matt LaFleur is a really good coach. I just wish, I think he needs an assistant to call the plays because I think he misses little subtleties like the clock management. I think that part of the thing is he's so busy trying to figure out his next play, talking to offensive people up in the booth and everything. I think he misses things. Like he's done it all throughout the season. He misses things like how many timeouts he has or how many like what he did at the end of the game.
End of half, end of game challenges. Those types of things. Yeah,
done it all season. Right. He needs to focus on the big picture, not the minutia of every single play on the field. And maybe a lot of people on Bill's live stream last couple shows, they say he needs someone to call the plays. And the head coach is not normally one that does such things. He has to look at the big picture.
Well, I mean, it depends. It's getting more common that head coaches are calling plays nowadays. Clemhead, that's a good call. I'm going to agree with you with a small tweak. Matt LaFleur needs to hire or identify someone on his staff to do the clock stuff and to do the timeout stuff. I think that's easier. Matt LaFleur keep calling the plays because I think that's maybe his best characteristic as a coach. Offensive schemer and sequencer and play caller. Find some nerd to do the other stuff or to help you out with the other stuff. I don't need Matt LaFleur to become a clock czar. He's a good play caller. I want him to employ or to identify someone on his staff to help him with that stuff. So then he can fully focus on plays and just kind of take in the information and take suggestions from others on his staff who are focusing on the other things. I think that's a smoother process. I think that's a smarter way to delegate. That would be me. That would be like, let's say, Mike, that like I couldn't handle the phones during the show and the video stream. Like I was having issues. I'm not going to hire a producer to host the show so I could do the other things. I'm going to host and I'm going to hire someone to do all the other stuff because I'm already hosting. Matt LaFleur's already play calling, and I think that's what he's best at. So it would be smarter for him. I get an analyst or get someone next to you on the sideline or up in the booth who's better at challenges, please God, and who can manage the timeouts and the clock. I'm going to take your suggestion. I'm going to tweak it. I think that's the best way to go about this. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Hello.
Hi, Ron from Chippewa.
Hey, Ron, what's going on?
Yeah, I got to disagree with you a little bit.
Okay.
I think Matt should go the other way. I think the biggest problem with Matt LaFleur, and we've seen it in almost every game this year, is he is too conservative, too tentative. He's a brilliant play designer, especially we've seen that this year with some of the new, like the 360 circle running play with Jacobs and
the spinner ring around the rosy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, ring around the rosy stuff that has worked awesome. But if you look at all the games that we've been in, and most of them, even the ones that we've won and lost, this team has only played really lights out for half the game.
Yeah.
And it's when they open up the playbook and they play fast. You can almost tell in some of the games when the guys come out of the locker room whether they're fired up, and it seems, from what I've seen anyway, I'm not sure if I'm just looking for it, but it almost seems like if the game plan is aggressive, these guys come out on fire.
Yep.
If not, they come out and, like the game with Jacobs, they come out and they fumble. They make little mistakes.
A little tight.
I think because, tight, whatever. But because they're a young team, if they come out with an aggressive game plan, like Alabama, you come out, you want to score 52 points. I mean, it's lights out, pedal to the metal, and go. And if the game plan is pedestrian, they just don't look the same. And hopefully we'll see it this weekend.
I hope, and my hope, and I appreciate the call. Thanks for listening, both of you up in Chippewa Falls. And I got to go to a break here. So sorry if you weren't able to get in, I can get you in at 5. I promise. But we got to get to our guests coming up next. My hope is that going into Philly for the first time this season, they can take the approach of, well, the expectations are actually kind of off us. And we're not actually expected to win this game. Expectations were through the roof this year. And for this young team was experiencing that for the first time. And I think there's probably a little bit of an adjustment period with that. And maybe that's why they felt so tighter than last year. Maybe this week it's like, well, let's just go play a game in Philly and see if we can't ruin this team's season. And it's really the first time this year they're going to be able to have that approach getting into a game. Maybe it works. Now, big picture moving forward, you need to be better with expectations. Like the Chiefs deal with expectations every week. Right now, the Packers can't necessarily become the Chiefs, but in order to take that next step, you need to go into games knowing, the pressure is on us. We got to win this one. And people are expecting us to win. We got to go out and perform without being tight, without freaking out. And I think that's the next step for this team. But maybe they find a workaround, with the situation going into Philly this weekend, probably similar to their situation going into Dallas last year. 5 minutes, we're going to come back, talk Badgers, hoops, college basketball with Isaac Trotter, our friend from 24/7 Sports.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. Going to get back into the Packers conversation at 5 o'clock. So if you have thoughts, I'll continue to take your calls at 5 o'clock. I understand the Matt LaFleur nitpicks, the critiques. I understand your critiques of Matt LaFleur. I think some of them are very valid, and I want to continue to field those critiques. We'll talk more about it. I'll take more of your calls at 5 o'clock. Mike Clemens will be here at 5:30. Earlier today, I connected with our friend Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports to talk about what Badgers basketball has been up to and college basketball as a whole. So we're going to do 15 minutes on that, then we'll get right back to football. Here is Isaac Trotter is here, 24/7 Sports. We talked before the season, and I mentioned, Badgers basketball, and I'm on in Madison, so we get some calls about it, but we've been so caught up in talking Packers as now the playoffs is about to begin. But I mean, going back to Friday, they scored 116 points. Our Badgers did at the Kohl Center. That's history. That's historical. I feel like we got to talk about that. Did you see any of Friday's game? Like when you see a Badgers team scoring 116 points, like that's something that you notice. That's wild.
Yeah, this is kind of the sign of the times. This is the most efficient scoring season in college basketball history. And I think Wisconsin's one of the teams kind of at the forefront of this, of like what the old previous iteration of Wisconsin basketball is versus what it is now. Like it's a cavern. Like it's a very, very different type of style. Wisconsin's shooting more threes. There's a lot more skill on the floor. I think it's interesting when you have both of your bigs that can stretch the floor from three. Like that wasn't the way the game was played 10 years ago. And it's a really kind of speaks to the evolution of where Wisconsin is. And, I think it also probably says a little bit about Iowa's lack thereof or of caring defensively. That's just kind of the way it is. But I do think it gives a little bit of credence to the theory that this Wisconsin team might have a little bit of a higher ceiling than we initially thought in the preseason. I think a lot of people looked at this group and go, hey, like who's the go-to guy? And then John Tanjay has this big November. I think the main guy all along was John Blackwell. And the fact that now you have both of these two kind of settling into 1A and 1B, depending on the game, really showcases that this group might be a lot more legitimate than, a lot of people, myself included, might have thought in the preseason.
Well, I was going to ask you about that first, because I know you're a big John Blackwell guy, and we've talked about that. And last night, this duo at Rutgers, and we talked about it before the season, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, those are kind of the names that you're thinking about going into games. And then last night, John Blackwell sets the tone early at 13 in the first half, and McGee doesn't play with the same volume, and he doesn't shoot with the same volume, but he hit some tough buckets. Wisconsin's backcourt was really impressive last night. So what have you seen? What do you continue to see from Blackwell? Because I know you love him.
He is unbelievable, and I think the two-way impact is so clear. His defense early on Dylan Harper. I didn't think Dylan Harper last night was looking like himself. He was kind of sick, but Blackwell was draped all over him in the corner, didn't let him get anything going early. And then you add in just how much more comfortable he is offensively, and you're starting to talk about him in a different tier. Is he is one of the top lead guards in the Big Ten, especially when you factor in the two-way impact. And the Blackwell-Tanjay type of 1-2 punch is interesting because it feels like Tanjay in transition is such a devastating guy who can get downhill, put a ton of pressure on the rim. Then Blackwell has kind of emerged into even more of their half court type of hub. He can hit his step back jumper. He's getting in the middle of the paint. He's creating for guys. He's able to shoot the three now at a higher level. He's definitely getting downhill as well too. So it's kind of fun. They can kind of both beat you in different ways, and it adds a little bit of variety to this Wisconsin offense. And I think the physicality continues to jump off the tape when you see them. They're just big and strong guards, and it's hard to find matchups like that. And it's not the perfect comp, but I think a little bit of that Illinois team last year that had Marcus Damask and Terrence Shannon, and they're 6'5", 6'6" athletic freaks. That's kind of what Wisconsin is emulating a little bit right now, because Blackwell is, 6'4", 205 pounds. John Tanjay 6'5", 220. You feel them on their drives. And if you have any ounce of a non-physicality, or you don't want to have any contact, they both seem to hunt that out. That's a skill that very few teams kind of have.
Well, and Tanjay, you mentioned his finishing ability. You said he puts pressure on the rim. So Wisconsin shot the lights out in the first half, and they shot the lights out against Iowa. But then at halftime, I'm thinking, okay, in the second half, the game probably should slow down a little bit, and you should pressure the rim. And I'm really impressed, I think, most of all with Tanjay, his ability to take a guy one-on-one, or even 1v2 around the rim and find a way to finish. Not just to draw the contact and to get to the line, but up and unders, floaters, going back up over his head. His finishing ability, and like you said, his ability to put pressure on the rim, which I like. I think that's what's jumped out to me the last couple games more than anything.
And it's really having a echo effect on everything else, because now suddenly the pick and pop threes for Nolan Winter are there, because that defender has to sag into the paint a little bit. And I think they're going to start to, I think Max Klesmit's not really found his, hey, what's my job this year? It's been a little bit tough for him to figure out what his role is. But eventually a Max Klesmit game is going to come, and he's going to have 5 or 6 threes just because the attention it's getting. And, I think what we'll see moving forward too is just how teams continue to load up against Blackwell and Tanjay should help this supporting cast continue to get comfortable. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they're shooting, 35% from three as a team, in large respect because of the one-on-one brilliance from Tanjay and Blackwell's ability. That doesn't matter who's guarding him. He's getting 2 feet in the paint pretty ridiculously routinely.
And I think you mentioned Klesmit. He felt out of place, and he left last night with an injury. He felt out of place a little in that his shots weren't falling, which will happen. But then he would fall asleep on a defensive assignment, or he'd have a turnover. I just think he's caught in flux right now. He gets hurt. Gilmore kind of fills in as that other guy. And I know they're two different positions, but the guy who just has to play defense and kind of help the ball move around and occasionally hit a shot. He was brilliant last night. And I messaged you about Blackwell last night just because I was feeling myself watching the first half. And you said, when did Gilmore get good? He's got to be one of the most improved players in the country. So he kind of plays a funny role with Badger fans because people love to pick on him, but he's legit helping them win. We saw that last night.
It's incredible. This is a former preferred walk-on who, could easily have got transferred down to anywhere else to try to get real minutes. And he's worked his way into the rotation where he's actually on the floor in closing time. that's pretty incredible. I think a lot of times last year, you talk to certain staffs, like they could relax a little bit when Carter Gilmore checked into the game offensively because he just didn't have to really worry about him. You saw a lot of defenders just sagging off him, sticking in the paint, just kind of making life hard for Wisconsin. You saw it get a little bit clunky when he was on the floor. And this year, like, he looks way more confident and assertive shooting the basketball. Like, he's made 5 threes in 4 Big Ten games. You're not asking him to shoot, 3 threes a game, but just being able to shoot a couple of those is so important, right? Just being able to be a threat is so important. And then athletically, like defensively, he's been outstanding for them. That ridiculous secondary rim protection that he's brought yesterday, that huge block he had playing with a little bit of swagger. I think one of my buddies who used to play college basketball, he says, like, when you start feeling yourself offensively, suddenly your athleticism starts to play up a little bit more defensively. And I think that's kind of showing with him right now. Like, the athleticism, the pop, the fight, the physicality, like the verticality from him, it's a little bit different. And I think it's his swagger that he's starting to develop offensively is starting to show up defensively. And he's been good for them, really, really good for them. And you're starting to find, like, there's not too much pressure on Nolan Winter, right? Like, you can have like a little bit of a rotation here where we can play, Gilmore and Winter together. We can play Winter and Crowell together. We can play Gilmore and Crowell together. You have some like you can mix things up a little bit because he's really, really solid defensively and he's going to sit down and guard. Like, I think, the who is your Tyler Wall was a really big question about this team. And Gilmore's kind of turned into that type of version of Wall defensively. I have Wall like a little bit of obviously a higher tier defensively, but Gilmore's given them a lot more defensively than I initially expected.
Isaac Trotter is here, 24/7 Sports. He has up today for you to read midseason national title contender tiers. And unless I missed it, I don't think Wisconsin, you have a picture of John Blackwell at the top of the story, which I'm looking at right now, but I couldn't find any Wisconsin, but I want to ask you about some of the details in that story. One more Badger thing. Help me be better at talking about Stephen Crowell, because I think there's games where he shrinks or even just disappears. It's normally against Illinois and Brad Underwood and those teams when he disappears the most. But like, I have a little Tyler Wall PTSD, and not that Tyler Wall wasn't good, but we spent like what felt, like seasons waiting for him to get somewhere where he just probably wasn't gonna. And I feel like we're waiting for Stephen Crowell to reach a place where he's probably not going to reach, but man, he can pass. And he had a couple minute stretch in the second half last night where nothing was happening and he's cleaning up around the rim and buying them, points to keep Rutgers at bay. And he had a double-double last night. So help me be a better analyst or a better talker when it comes to Stephen Crowell, because I think he's a difficult player to talk about.
Agreed. I think it's nuanced. I think for me, I like to buy Stephen Crowell against some of the more finesse teams and like to sell him against some of the more just like super chiseled, physical, souped up athletic teams. Sure. And so I think that's kind of where I'm at. He's serviceable. I think there are going to be days where you're probably really frustrated with him because that's been the Stephen Crowell experience. And then there's going to be other days where he really helps you. And I think it's also important to like he got challenged by this coaching staff early in the season about like his effort on the glass, like what he was bringing on the floor, like not playing with enough bite. You're a 5th-year senior at this point. Like it's about time to like play like one. And so I am always curious about those guys because they can, shrivel up and be like, well, this is kind of what I've done, or they can change and start to like find it a little bit down the stretch and, have a little bit of senioritis where it's like, wait, how much more weeks of college basketball do I have left? This is really fun. I want to make the most out of it. So I think it's one of those situations where you're probably not going to get everything you want out of Crowell. Like, I'm not expecting him to be a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd team All Big Ten guy, but he's going to be as important as anybody for this team moving forward because this league is completely loaded with bigs. Like every single night, like we're seeing different bigs, and you can put a list together. It's like Michigan's tandem up front is outstanding. Illinois has one in Tommy Avicic. Purdue has one in Trey Kaufman-Renn. Indiana, we know the guys there, right? With Maryland, Derek Queen, and Juju Reese. Like, he is going to have to go toe-to-toe with dudes every single night. Oregon, Nate Biddle, like Iowa, Owen Freeman. Like, it's nuts. And it never ends in this league. And if your 7-foot, 5th-year center can't bring it, like, you're going to lose. And that's what they need from him. They need him to bring it on a nightly basis because if you don't, like, you will not have a chance in this league with this, this caliber of centers that, even the worst teams like Washington and Minnesota have interior dudes that are awesome in Dawson Garcia and Great Ossenberg.
Yeah, and I remember Greg Gard calling out Stephen Crowell as much as I've ever heard him call out a player in a presser earlier this year. And I don't remember if Crowell had 1 rebound or if he had 0, but Greg Gard was basically like, how does he only have, however many rebounds, and he paused. Like it was stark. And to see the way that he's put together some pretty good performances, and I think you're correct, right? Against the finesse teams, he's going to give you probably a little bit more. And I always use like the Kofi Coburn Illinois team as an example. Like that's his nightmare, and that's why they haven't beat Illinois in I don't know how many years or how many matchups. Like it just never ends against the bigger physical teams. But like last night, just watching him and what he provided for them in stretches when they really needed it too, when the offense couldn't get anything going, and he bought him a couple buckets, with putbacks and things like that, was really nice. So your national title contender tiers, I went to look for Kansas. You have Kansas on the doorstep on tier 2, some Big Ten teams a little higher. Marquette's really high. Illinois, who we mentioned, is tier number 1. I have followed what's gone on at Kansas with AJ Storr. And you said before the year when we chatted, it's like, it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for him. Let's talk about Kansas, because there's some names like AJ Storr that Badgers fans know. Hunter Dickinson's there. What did you write about? What would you tell us about a team like Kansas?
They've been a disappointment this month. They have a huge win over Duke. Michigan State win looks okay. North Carolina at home looks okay. But this month, they've been atrocious. The Creighton loss was bad. They lose to Missouri. They get punked by West Virginia, who didn't have 2 of their best 3 players. Like that's a problem. And so I think Bill Self has not been very happy with this group right now, not been happy with AJ Storr, and hasn't minced words. Even Rylan Griffin is another big-time transfer that they've added. He's not been happy with it. And it's odd, because you kind of expect Bill Self as like this gangster on the recruiting trail, gets who he wants in the portal and gets who he wants in the high school ranks, and he's going to put together a team that's awesome. And for the last couple of years, it feels like the guys that they've brought in haven't been hits. Like last year, they brought in a Timberlake kid from Towson. It had a lot of expectations for him. Wasn't a hit. This year, they brought in AJ Storr, and it's just been a struggle. And so we've seen little pockets from him, different times where he's popped up for big time games, or maybe he plays a defense for some routine stretches. But for the most part, he's had a really hard time like buying into what they want from him as a cutter, as a play mover, and they have him all messed up mentally. And Bill Self has said that multiple times, where he just doesn't really know what to do, where to be, what's my job? Like, am I scorer? Am I supposed to set screen? Like, what am I supposed to do? And I think Kansas's ceiling is really determined by how quickly he gets up to speed, but there's a chance it doesn't, because the first couple of months have not been very pretty in that regard.
You have Arizona on the doorstep as well. What has Tommy Lloyd figured out? Because I know Wisconsin beat the brakes off of them. And then everyone spent 2 weeks as the Badgers got off to a slow start in Big Ten play. Everyone's, spent that time saying, well, the Arizona loss isn't even impressive anymore. What do we think about Arizona? Because that's kind of a measuring stick for Wisconsin after they kind of opened up the serious part of their schedule with a big win at home that Friday night game.
Arizona, that win is going to age really well. Arizona's figured some things out. They've had some injuries up front, and that's actually kind of been a blessing in disguise. They couldn't shoot. They just could not shoot. And so they've changed. They've added Carter Bryant to the lineup. They've added Henry Visar to the mix. And suddenly just having a couple of guys that can make just a few perimeter jump shots have opened up the paint for a group that I still think is really good defensively. And like that Arizona-Wisconsin game was kind of a mess from a Zebra's perspective, just so many fouls, so many trips to the free throw line. But when Arizona doesn't foul, they're outstanding defensively. And I think this is a group that's going to get a lot better with time, because Tommy Lloyd's a really, really good coach. And the physicality in the Big 12 kind of suits their game a little bit more. They played some finesse teams in non-conference play, had some teams just go nuts from 3 against them. I think they're going to start to settle in, and they certainly have. They went on the road and beat a very good Cincinnati team. They beat TCU at home. They're not that far away, I think, from being, a title team. And a lot of people would disagree with that, but I've just been a little bit bullish on what the tape has shown from the last couple of weeks. I think the lineup switch to get more shooting on the floor in the front court is real. 60
seconds. Who do you think the best team in the Big Ten is right now?
I will take a mulligan on that one, because I can give you a different answer every day. At this point, I think Illinois has the highest ceiling. I don't think they're going to win the league. Illinois has the highest ceiling because they have an NBA point guard. They have a terrific backcourt, and they can really, really shoot the cover off the ball. Their best version, their best 40 minutes is better than any Big Ten team we've seen this year. But I think teams like Purdue and UCLA have a chance to win the league just because of their every single night, that Purdue's going to really have an elite ball screen offense. And UCLA, every single night, they're going to be absolutely elite defensively, and that gives you a little bit of a higher floor.
That's right. UCLA. You said that. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm still adjusting to that, honestly. Well, Isaac Trotter, anything that we can look for 24/7 the next couple of days to watch from you?
We'll have a weekend primer coming up, and then we'll have a bunch of big time content coming up, just kind of like about Iowa State, or if you're really looking forward to that. But I think at this point, I might have to do a 10 things in my 10 things column. I might have to look into John Blackwell's emergence, because it's really hard to find many sophomores that are playing at the level that he is this year.
It's been really fun to watch. Appreciate the time, man. Thanks. We'll have to talk soon.
Anytime.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Sports Show will resume in 1 minute.
Wisco Sports Show. Got a break in about 2 minutes here. We'll get an update from Zach, and we're going to hit it hot and heavy starting at 5 o'clock. I want to get back into our conversation around Matt LaFleur, take more of your calls. Mike Clemens will be here at 5:30. A little bit of breaking news this afternoon that might not seem like it matters, but I think it does for us Packers fans. The Raiders fired Antonio Pierce, the interim that took over last year, which is another NFL opening. And it's like, oh, the Raiders, what does that matter for us Packers fans? I think the more job openings, the better for us, because that means more job openings for Ben Johnson, more job openings for Brian Flores, more job openings for Aaron Glenn. Get these guys the heck out of the NFC North. So the more potential job openings, the more opportunities for some of these really, really good coordinators between the Vikings and between the Lions to go. And more options other than the Bears. Like, the more jobs that open up that aren't the Bears, not only a greater likelihood that Flores or Glenn or Johnson leave their current teams, but a greater chance that they're like, well, I'm not going to the Bears. I got other options. Why would I go to the Bears? I could go, work with the Raiders. I don't think that's an amazing job, but would you rather work, Tom Brady's an owner there. They're going to have a high draft pick, new quarterback, stud tight end. I get to live in Vegas, new city, right? New stadium. Like, the more openings, the better. because it's the more opportunities for Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson, and Brian Flores to get the heck away from the Green Bay Packers in the NFC North, and options that aren't the Bears. I don't want one of those guys taking the Bears job if we can avoid it. Let's ship him out and hope that the Bears end up with someone second rate, which I think is probably what's going to happen anyways, because why would anyone great want to go to Chicago? Hour 2 next.
It's an off day for the Packers. They're going to get back in the field tomorrow to start preparing for their wild card matchup with Philadelphia coming up on Sunday. They do still having lost their final 2 games of the season. That's a stark contrast to how they entered the playoffs a year ago, playing some of their best football. Coach LaFleur doesn't put too much stock in the idea of momentum from week to week.
Yeah, I think that's more for you guys. I mean, obviously, you would have liked to win every game going into it, especially going into the playoffs. But I think the game is pretty fresh right now. So today is a fresh day, and it's like moving on. So as soon as the guys get done with their meetings, it's on to Philly, and that's just like in this league. If you look at the past, I don't have a very good future.
Well, the Packers already know they won't have Christian Watson on Sunday after he tore his ACL. The status of key defenders like Quay Walker and Evan Williams is still up in the air. The Packers and Eagles on Sunday in Philly is set for 3:30. Turning to the Badgers, they're back to a full coaching staff. They fully hired Jordan Reed as wide receivers coach. Spent the last 2 seasons at Western Michigan. Replaces Kenny Guyton, who's moved to QB's coach. Farmers deal with a lot with the long days. This is your reminder to take breaks, stretch, have a snack, and hydrate your body. Avoid farm accidents by keeping yourself healthy. Visit realmutual.com to learn how Real Mutual supports Wisconsin farmers and prioritize safety on the farm. The Badgers are enjoying a day off after getting their first road win in nearly 12 months last night at Rutgers to help them improve their record in the Big Ten to 2-2. They're going to be hosting Minnesota on Friday, and the Bucs also winners last night up in Toronto. They're going to get today off. They'll host the Spurs tomorrow night. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
It's a disappointing finish, disappointing loss. It's the same thing. You know, there's a lot of areas that we can clean up and we got to be better in. And the same kind of messages going through that locker room is, you know, we got to go out there and make these plays and execute. We just have to be better.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Getting back to the phone calls, we'll continue to talk Packers. Wanted to talk a little Badger hoops, selfishly, but Friday night they scored 116. Last night they went to the rack and looked awesome. I mean, Blackwell's a stud. Crowell had a great game. Gilmore had some awesome moments. Just a really fun game. So I wanted to take that opportunity, just 12, 15 minutes, connect with our friend Isaac Trotter, talk college hoops, and we'll certainly do more of that once football season is over. Hopefully that doesn't happen for a bit. Hopefully the Packers season doesn't end this weekend and they can beat an elite team for the first time this year. I do, and I tweeted about this earlier today at Wisco Grant. Packers fans and my fellow owners too, like, we need to recognize the dark humor in losing twice to the Lions, twice to the Vikings, and potentially twice to the Eagles, all in the same season. I hope that's not the case. They also have the opportunity to get revenge on all of these teams, possibly. I don't know how the bracket would shake out, but they have an opportunity to get revenge on the Eagles. And then as the playoffs go along, maybe the bracket won't allow for them to play both Detroit and Minnesota, but certainly one of them, if they can continue to advance. I think they would go to Detroit the following week because they'd be the lowest seed remaining and the Lions are the 1 seed. I don't know how the machinations would continue from there, but they also have an opportunity to get revenge, and that starts this weekend. Very quick comment to kind of reset the show the way we began the show back at 4 o'clock before I get back to your calls. I'm hearing you, Matt LaFleur critics. I see you. I hear you. I feel you. It sounds like a public service announcement. I think Matt LaFleur is a good coach. I also think there's some trends this year that really bother me and concern me, especially for a coach who's been, 19, 20, 21, 22. This is his 6th season, unless I'm misreading things. Is this his 5th or 6th season? No matter what, like, this is not his 2nd, 3rd go-round. He's on his 2nd quarterback. He's been on multiple playoff runs. He's had to sneak into the playoffs. He's gone into the playoffs as a top seed before. Like, he's He's seen a lot. Home playoff games, road playoff games, all of it. Some of the mistakes he's making should not be made at this stage in his career if he's going to be an elite championship level coach. And look, you can't win a championship till you win a championship, right? If the standard was, well, he's not a good coach, what has he ever won? Well, then there's like 6 or 7, I think, active NFL coaches, we did this last week, who've won championships, and one's Mike McCarthy, right? And one's John Harbaugh. And Ravens fans, I think, I wouldn't say that they want to put Harbaugh on the hot seat, but it's like, man, we've had some great Ravens teams with Lamar. Why can't we get over the top, right? So McVay and Reed, in my eyes, are unimpeachable. The rest of the league, like, they're all trying to reach the mountaintop. They're all trying to reach the pinnacle. You can't win a championship. You're not a championship coach till you're a championship coach. But one thing that really concerns me about this Packers team in year 2 with Jordan Love is all of the big picture numbers about the offense are better. EPA per play, right? All of those alphabet stats would tell us that it's a better offense this year compared to last year. And yet the results haven't been there necessarily. They're averaging 30 points a game over the last month. I understand they've scored, but how has it looked? How has it played out against elite teams? And my concern is, like, and the analogy I keep using, because I think it's a perfect analogy. I'm going to be honest. I'm patting myself on the back. I think I cooked with this one. If you were investing your money through a financial advisor and you sat down with them at the end of the year and they said the markets are doing great, NASDAQ, S&P 500, all of the big ones, right? They're all great. They're all up. Year over average is better than last year, better than the year before. We're in a great spot investing wise. Now, your numbers aren't great. Your numbers are actually down, but the big picture, we're doing great. I'd say, well, wait, if the market's killing, if all the numbers across the market are up, but I'm down, that's on you, right? So I look at Matt LaFleur a little bit this year, and this builds off our conversation from yesterday. What have the Packers improved at? Well, the running game's gotten better, okay, but the offense should yield better results, and not necessarily scoring totals, but the execution and the performance in the biggest moments hasn't been there. And if the overwhelming numbers are telling me that the offense is pretty good and it hasn't manifested in the most important moments, then I think that's a reflection of coaching. All right, to your calls, as promised. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. Tom in Oak Creek. How are you?
I'm excellent, Tom in Oak Creek. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
So you and I have gone back and forth a few times on Twitter that, the offense can win games and keep scoring to not put the defense in these do or die scenarios. Yeah. So I was thinking about this fast start thing, and I actually went back and crunched the numbers, and boy, it is a real thing. So this year, when the Packers have scored anything on their first drive, touchdown or field goal, they're 5-1. When they don't score, they're 6-5. And when it's a touchdown, they're 5-0, versus if they don't score a touchdown, 6-6.
Mm-hmm. And
that's what we've even been over the last 2 years. If they score on their first drive, they're 9-3, 9-1 if it's a touchdown. And they're a 500 team. They're 11-11 over the last 2 years if they don't score first.
Yeah.
So I think there's really, really something to it here. They've got to come out guns blazing and score and not sputter and kind of, be weak the whole first half.
Yeah. And my okay, so the numbers bear it out, right, Tom? My concern about that is sometimes things are out of your control. Sometimes you get hosed on a bad holding call. Sometimes you go for it on fourth down, you call the right play and a wide receiver drops the ball. Like, sometimes you're not going to score on the opening drive, right? Even if you show up ready to play, and even if sometimes it's not going to happen. My concern is when this Packers team doesn't score early and when they don't get off to a hot start, it's like they freak out. It's like, oh crap, there went our chance to win the game. There's 3.5 more quarters. And it seems like this team, it's almost a predestination thing. And that concerns me because I don't like my team being coached in a way. I don't like them being wired in a way. We have one way to win the game. And if it doesn't work early, then it's not going to work at all. And I think you can see that playing out in the game. That concerns me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's maybe the first possession was an exaggeration, but it's a pretty stark difference in the record when they're scoring right away or not.
Yeah. And look, that's a good call, Tom. I appreciate it. Every team's better when they start fast. Every team's going to win more when they go up to a 7-0 score, okay? And you're more likely to take a lead against bad teams. You're more likely to beat a bad team. So, we can parse out the data. The best version of the Packers is the version that starts fast. Great. But guess what? If you're going to win multiple playoff games, they're probably not going to all go according to plan perfectly. And I need a team that's a little bit more resilient and a little bit more steady to bounce back or to react when the opening couple drives don't go perfectly according to plan. The game can't be decided in the first quarter, guys. I don't accept that from a coach. You got to be able to talk with your guys and work through a play sheet and figure out and adjust if need be and still be able to win a game, even if the opening drive doesn't go according to plan, perfectly to plan. I think that's very fair, and I think that's a very reasonable expectation of a coach if you're trying to beat great teams in the playoffs, win multiple playoff games, and win a championship. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Yeah, Grant, it's Stephen Crawl calling in, man.
What's up, Big Ron? What's going on?
I resent being called serviceable by your last guest, man. I just dropped the double-double on Ron Harper's son for crying out loud.
My God.
What do I got to do here?
You didn't go to the game at Rutgers? How far is that from you? You could have gone to the Rack last night, I bet.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. It's about 45 minutes away because it's kind of not really near an interstate.
Whole 45 minutes, Big Ron. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Look, all right. Guilty as charged, Grant. I got caught with my pants down.
I'm just messing with you.
I didn't even realize that the game was on. I didn't even realize they were playing in Piscataway.
That's fine.
That's so fine. I did go to the Rutgers football game, and that was the best Badgers performance of the year.
Yeah. They shoved it up Schiano's rear end. Yeah, it was an awesome game.
They did, yeah. And I wish I would. I caught the second half. They played great, and Crawl dropped the double-double on Harper's kid. So I mean, he's been, since Greg Gard called him out, he's been playing pretty well, you know. Yeah. And you know, the other thing is, I love the financial markets reference, by the way, with the advanced stats.
But you would know that you've worked in this. You've worked in this business.
Yes. And it's all about relative performance, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. That's a classic Wall Street analogy. And yeah, I mean, if the markets are going up and everything's going up and your portfolio's not, there's definitely something wrong.
Yeah.
So I love that analogy. And, you know, I was doing some digging while I was waiting on hold. And, you know, with respect to this Badger basketball team, this is not your father's Badger basketball team under Dick Bennett. In fact, this isn't even your older brother.
Yeah, I was going to say, forget my father. This isn't my slightly older brother's, but this isn't my Badger basketball team that I grew up watching.
Yeah, this isn't even like the 2015, you know, Final Four teams. This is 83 points a game. That's 35th in the nation. There's 363 Division I teams, believe it or not. So we are in the top 10% of offense. And we're actually, if you go to kenpom.com, which is a great college basketball like advanced stats site, we're 12th in offensive net rating. So like in points per 100 possessions, we're 12th in the nation. And we're like literally we score 122 points per 100 possessions. So that's very efficient. And we're only 3 points on that stat away from second place. Like Auburn's in first place and they're like by a wide margin. But after that, you know, we're right there in the mix. It's really tight. Like we're in the top 3% of all Division I teams in offensive efficiency. Who would have ever thought that? You know, just even going back 10 years, you know, on this team to the Bo Ryan era.
Well, and Greg Gard said before the season, he told Zach and Jesse on The Swing, their podcast, which I was listening to today's episode a little bit before the show. Like Greg Gard's talked about this. We need to become an NBA program in college because that's how the portal works. That's how this has kind of shaped up with the new rules and the new format in college athletics. And you need to score more, right? You just straight up need to score more points. And I think Greg Gard has gone 2 for 2 with team building, the way that they've revamped the program and the way they've put an emphasis on offense. You've seen instant results this year.
Yeah, and it's really going to help in the transfer portal and recruiting high school kids, you know, playing this more NBA style offense, you know, because, you know, that's the way he got AJ Storr here last year. That's the way he got Tanjay here this year. He's like, look, you know, you're a stud. When you come in, you're being undervalued by your old team. We're going to feature you. We're gonna take the, you know, the shackles off. We're gonna let you, you know, just do what you want and play. You know, and the other thing is, there's a stat for fast break points, and we're not even that high in fast break points. So we're scoring a lot and we're very efficient, but we're not doing it on the break. We're doing it on the, you know, once the other team gets back. And you know the team that's ranked 5th in fast point breaks per game is UW Milwaukee.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting stat.
How about Green Bay? Where do they stand in that stat?
Yeah, poor Doug Gottlieb, man. Just fade him. Bet against Green Bay money line all season long. Can't even beat a Division II team, Grant.
Well, don't sleep on Michigan Tech. It's a good program. I know nothing about the program. I just like the school. Thanks, Big Ron. And you would know about the financial markets, right? I think that's a good analogy for what's going on with the Packers, because I keep seeing from all the Packers accounts, from the Bukowskis and the Zach Cruzes and the Zach Zackerson, Zach Jacobsons of the world, right? It's like, well, EPA per play, all of these big picture stats. The Packers are better on offense this year. It's like, okay, but if that's true, and it must be, that's what the numbers are bearing out, right? That means that Jordan Love and I think Matt LaFleur, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think that means that they haven't executed in the biggest moments. They haven't avoided turnovers in the biggest moments. And they've committed dumb penalties and they haven't executed at a high level. Well, attention to detail, that falls on coaching. And again, I love the financial advisor analysis. Like if the market is up and all the big picture numbers are up, well, then we should see that in the results. We haven't really seen that in the results. And to me, that's a coaching thing. That's a preparation thing. That's a mid-game adjustment thing. That's an attention to detail thing. And all that to me is on coaching. And I like Matt LaFleur, but I think nitpicks and critiques this week are more than fair. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
It's Darnell the Chump.
Hey, Darnell the Chump. What do you think? What do you got going on?
Well, so I talked Packers yesterday. I actually went to the Badger game against Iowa on Friday, and it was probably the funnest Badger game I've been to since college.
Yeah, imagine going to a basketball game and your team just doesn't miss any shots. Like, yeah, that would be a fun game.
It was just insane. It was insane. It wasn't just John Blackwell who had a fantastic game, right?
Yeah.
It was like Kamari McGee with his just unorthodox and honestly ugly shooting form, somehow going 4 for 4 from three. Carter Gilmore hit 2 threes. Like, it was just like. Also, I've been kind of staunchly against Carter Gilmore, and he's kind of made me a believer this year. And I don't know how I feel about that yet. But
when Klesmit got hurt last night and Carter Gilmore came in, they looked better. Klesmit was turning the ball over. He was falling asleep on defense. He couldn't hit shot. I like Klesmit. What am I supposed to not point out what I saw with my eyes last night during the game?
It's a weird vibe. But I went with my dad, and he was kind of talking about, he's like, before the transfer portal stuff, I'd be really worried about the 2025, 2026 Badgers. Like, why are you talking about that? And then he said, because like Blackwell, he's probably going to the NBA, right? He could have probably gone potentially last year just with his body, right?
Yeah, I don't know how that works. Like, these Rutgers kids are supposed to be like top 5 picks, and both of them look awful. In fact, one of them, I was looking at the box score today because I didn't have anything in front of me. I was just watching on TV. Ace Bailey went 3 of 16 from the field last night. Like, that guy's going top 5? What? I don't know. So I guess college to the NBA, you need to be much smarter than I to figure out what translates and what doesn't. So I don't know about Blackwell. Or maybe another program throws a bag. Maybe Kansas is like, well, AJ Storr didn't work out. Let's throw a bag at John Blackwell. Maybe that'll work better.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. Like, because in years gone by, like John Tonje, he's gone. Right, he's a grad transfer, so he's outdone his availability at this point. So he's gone. Klesmit might be gone at this point. I don't know. So like I just they have to replace a lot going into next year, and going back 2-3 years that would have been really, really difficult. But they did exactly that going into the season. So I'm not even really worried about it. Like I might have been. If we were graduating Kaminsky and Decker and Trayvon Jackson and everybody at the same time,
Douye Dukin.
Yes, Douye Dukin. Everybody graduated at the same time, and then they took a step back. But they didn't have a way to pay players and go get top talent from other schools for the next year back then. So it's so weird to be in a completely different era, but it doesn't feel like it's been that long since the past era. You know what I mean?
No, I would totally agree. And that's why it's funny what Big Ron said. And I've had this thought too. So I'm glad Big Ron and I were thinking along similar lines. It's like, this isn't your grandpa's Badgers. It's like, it's not my high school Badgers. It's not what it was 2 years ago. It's not like, wow, remember 20 years ago? No, remember 2021. Remember Ethan Happ? Like it's changed wholesale. And I think this whole year so far, look, we got a lot of season left. But this year up until this point has been such a massive feather in Greg Gard's cap because he made conscious decisions about how to adapt or how to adjust this program to fit the adaptations and the adjustments of college basketball as a whole. And the results have been brilliant so far. And you compare that, football's a different sport, Fickell's a different coach, I know, but it feels like football is trying to figure out what we want to build through through high school recruiting. But we also can't keep our own recruits, but we'll supplement through the portal, but the guys we're getting in the portal aren't really supplementing all that. Like they're treading water, kind of trying to grab whatever. And Greg Gard is driving the boat and he's like, yep, the river's going to go this way and I'm going to go this way and it's going to work. Like it's very clear and distinct two programs. One coach has a really good read on what's happening in the sport and how he at Wisconsin should adjust. Maybe this MO would not work at another school, but at Wisconsin, it's working. That's kind of what Luke Fickell needs to figure out. How can he best build Wisconsin to fit in this current landscape of college football? It's not what's right for Colorado. It's not what's right for Bama or Oregon. What's right for Wisconsin to best succeed in this environment? And Greg Gard has just nailed it to the cross. Let's take a 3-minute break. We'll come back. If you're on hold, there's 2 callers. I'll get to you, I promise. I just want to stay ahead of schedule or on schedule because Mike Clemens is coming up at 5:30. It's the Wisco Sports Show. We're back after this.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Mike Clemens, as you might be currently seeing on the live stream, YouTube and Facebook. The Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills. Like and subscribe to either page. Always streaming on Twitter as well, at Wisco Grant. And you can catch the show afterwards in podcast form. Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find it there. I would appreciate if you would subscribe because it doesn't cost you anything. In fact, it takes all of 2 seconds, but it helps me greatly. So if you listen to the show, that would be a way that you could help support without any real time or any money. You don't have to cut a check. You don't have to Venmo. Just go click a button on your phone. I would appreciate it. J.A. Krebs tweeted in over the break on Darnell the Chump's Blackwell point about like how he might go to the league with that body and that frame and that build, right? That's a potential NBA player. Who knows? Maybe another school throws a bunch of money at him. Who knows in this current state of college basketball? J.A. Krebs tweeted in, Blackwell is absolutely not an NBA player right now until he can shoot better, like a lot better. I don't know the science of projecting college players to the league because I don't know. I watch college basketball and you think you know who the best players are on the floor, and then you read a draft guide and it's actually like the guy who played 6 minutes and missed the only 4 shots he took. Like, yeah, that's actually the guy who's projected to be a lottery pick. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I know you look into the size and the weight and the measure. I know, but it's difficult to sometimes the college football product doesn't always translate with the eye test to who is headed to the NBA. And I responded to Jay Krebs, like, I don't know that it matters if Blackwell can shoot. There's been plenty of college prospects and players drafted high who have little to no shooting ability. Ben Simmons was the first overall pick because of his traits. And the idea was, well, he'll learn how to shoot. It's not that hard. And some of them learn how to shoot. Some of them don't. And some of them are so physically gifted that shooting is like, you just need to shoot a little bit. You don't even need to get that good at it. So I don't know. I'm not sure that any player you need to improve your shooting to go to the league. I don't know. Do you? Doesn't seem to matter all that much for some players who even go in the lottery. It's not like second round flyers, lottery picks. A couple of calls I said I'd get to you. Thank you for waiting through the break. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Ridge Runner Mark, how are we doing?
Ridge Runner Mark, I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing good. Busy day of stuff at work. And while I've been listening on hold, I've had multiple questions that have popped in my head because slightly ADHD.
Well, what an engaging show this is then. Wow, I'm glad to hear that.
So, Matt LaFleur.
Yeah.
Here's my question, and this is why I'm asking it. So, Mike McCarthy, what year in coaching did he win his Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers? How many years was he a head coach when that win came through?
What did he take over in 2008? So what was that, his fourth year? Third or fourth year?
Third or fourth year.
Yeah, something like that.
Now, with LaFleur, obviously, I think we're pretty sure we're past that.
Yes. I love how neither one of us are sure. We don't know how long McCarthy was there. We don't know how long for sure LaFleur's been here, but we're sure that we've crossed the point with LaFleur of McCarthy, despite knowing no numbers, Ridge Runner Mark. I love this. I love the way we're doing this.
I'm all about it. So then the question is when do we start, all the people who want to quote unquote fire LaFleur now, when do we actually start talking about it? Because I feel like LaFleur has always been ahead of the curve.
Sure. Because
he had Rodgers and Rodgers was on fire. And he got ahead of the curve of what a normal head coach should be. Because we always talk about rookies. Well, their third year, they should really get it figured out and should really be cooking. Do we really have that with head coaches? Because there's so many variables with a coach to say, okay, he should really be cooking now.
Yeah.
And that changes if the player gets hurt or they don't have a right GM or this, that, and the other. And I'm just wondering, when do we actually seriously start saying that? Because production-wise, how many wins does he have versus losses? He is constantly winning.
Yeah, and a caller brought this up on Bill's show earlier today. Something I want to add, and then I want you to keep going, Mark. They're not winning these games with smoke and mirrors this year. They have won a lot of these games handedly, and I think they have earned their 11-6 record. I don't look at that record and say, well, they earned those 11 wins. Those weren't fake smoke and mirrors wins. Those were 11 solid wins.
Right, and so to counter the whole idea that LaFleur is quote unquote should be fired and not doing a good job, it's only Jordan Love's second year playing as a full-time quarterback. Yes, it's his fifth year. Rodgers, he made the playoffs in his second year, and I believe that was the huge shootout with Arizona.
Yep.
And they still lost.
Yep.
So the other question I have is, how would we be treating this season if they didn't have the end to last season?
Sure.
If they had the end of this season, last season, where they fell on their face in the last game and we don't know what's going to happen in the playoffs, would we be this upset with how they ended the season?
Sure. This is a great point, Ridge Runner Mark. And Packers fans don't want to hear this. the NFL is like more than any other league. It's not a patient league. We are not patient fan bases, which is why anytime, Tony said yesterday, well, Matt LaFleur, a lot of pressure next year. Every coach is under a lot of pressure. There's no coach is like, well, he could suck for 3 or 4 years. Not gonna lose his job. You know what I mean? So Matt LaFleur's not in a unique spot that next year is going to be a big year. Next year is a big year for every head coach. I know the Packers fans don't want to hear this. This is going to be a popular thing to hear or to say, but I'll say it. Last year, they were probably a little bit ahead of schedule. So to Ridge Runner Mark's point, let's say last year they lose the final game of the year and they miss out on the playoffs by a game, but it feels very similar to what happened with the Lions in 2022, where they finished the season in a way where it's like, they're about ready to go. They didn't make the playoffs, but they're about ready to go. Well, if that would have happened last year, then this year they go 11-6 and they come close to beating a lot of the elite teams, but they didn't. Then it would feel like much more of a logical step this year following last year. But they got hotter than even the highest hopes could have hoped for last year. They won a playoff game. I think they're still I think they're progressing. I think this year is a nice progressing step, and then you hope that next year really is the year. We thought that maybe this year could be the year. Texans, Packers, both. And both have been good. The Packers have been better than the Texans, especially considering the Texans are in a much worse division. But I don't want to say that actually they overperformed last year, because that's just, but they won those games last year and they got into the playoffs and they beat the Cowboys. We saw it, right? That wasn't fake. But I think Ridge Runner Mark makes a good point in that if last year they would have had a similar season to the 2022 Lions, then this year seems like a nice progressive step. My only problem with that is I still don't really love the way that Matt LaFleur has handled a lot of things. And to me, that's not young players. That's a coach not coaching as well as he should be. So that would be my one pushback to that train of thought, Ridge Runner Mark. Let's take one more call, then we'll break for Mike Clemens. Wisco Sports Show, who's this?
Hey, Grant. How you doing today?
Is that Cone?
It is. I'm in my car.
I was going to say, I'm just not used to you being on the road. There's callers that I expect to be in the car. You're not one of them. What's going on?
I think what you're saying with like, okay, all these numbers on paper look better than last year, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
This is the America that Pete Bukowski and Zach Jacobson want.
Yep.
They want the eye test to go away. And eye test, gut check tells you this Packers team is not playing as well as they were last year at this point, even if the numbers say so.
Well, and
so,
and really quickly, I think some of those numbers, last year's numbers, are due to the fact that they went like 2 straight months where they didn't score. They didn't do anything. They had like 4 games in a row last year where they went 3 and out for the first 3 quarters of every game. So I don't know that we can judge all of last year versus all of this year. It's really the second half of last year versus all of this year. And I think those numbers would probably look different.
And I don't even know if we can judge year to year. I mean, you said it, the NFL, it's like, it's a week-to-week league. It's a year-to-year league.
Mm-hmm.
Gerard Mayo fired after 1 year with a crap roster. I mean, I don't even know if we should be. I think it might be even bad faith comparing last year.
Yeah, I just think that it's an interesting point, because I've seen a lot of that information and it has come from the, Zach Jacobsons and the Peter Bukowskis of the world. Those are the exact type of accounts that are like, look at the EPA per play. Guys, trust me, they're better this year. And I think in lots of ways that they are. They've been more consistent from week 1 to now week 18. Like that, the product, I think this has become a more grown-up team. The problem is like Jordan Love's making a lot of money and Matt LaFleur's in year 5 or 6. We still haven't completely nailed that down. Those guys, I look to be a little bit steadier, and they just haven't been as steady, and the process hasn't been as perfect and clean as I would like to see this year.
Amen. And you know what? You don't need numbers. You don't need DVOA to know that this Badger basketball team is a problem.
I knew that's
in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Oh. Last night was so fun. That game, I was jumping. I wasn't jumping up and down, but I was fist pumping in my living room the way that I haven't for a Packer game in like well over a month.
Amen. I mean, like I said this last night on X, the Everything app. It's tough enough to win in this league. It's even harder to win on the road on a Monday night in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Sorry, Big Ron. New Jersey is the armpit of America.
New Brunswick, America's suburb. Yeah, and how about Carter Gilmore and Stephen Crowell? A couple of a couple of goats, and not a good goats, on Badgers Twitter really having some nice moments last night. I really like this team.
Yeah, I think we all owe an apology to Carter Gilmore. Like your guest Isaac said it best. Like 2 years ago, whoever would have thought that Carter Gilmore would be an option in this rotation to close out a game?
Yeah.
I mean, he is just rock solid. He knows his assignments. He doesn't do too much, but he still makes an impact. And I just love this team. Kamari McGee, dog. John Blackwell, dog. I mean, just players all around. Greg Gard, stud. Calling out Stephen Crowell. Knows how to push his buttons. I mean, this is just a well-oiled machine. Wisconsin basketball is in good hands. And I know the Greg Gard gauge might be a bit. I think the bigger bit is anybody who's still in the fire guard camp.
Unbelievable.
I mean, what are you holding on to?
I don't know. And I think the best way to describe it, Cone, I got to go because I got to get to Clemens. Gard has perfectly realized this is what college basketball is. And this is what I must do at this school and this conference to best win and succeed in that environment. And I think Badger football is still miles away from figuring that out. He's got this thing dialed. He understands it perfectly, and it's been fun to watch. Mike Clemens coming up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
A disappointing loss for sure. I think everybody in the locker room feels that, and it's obviously not the note we wanted to end on with a loss to the Vikings and then turn around and a loss here. But it's the reality of our situation. We got to find a way to improve this week, get better, and look forward to seeing Philly.
That's Jordan Love after the game on Sunday. Basically asked, you're going to the playoffs and you've had a great year, but kind of weird that you went 1-5 in the division. You lost to the Bears for the first time in forever. So Jordan Love kind of just talking about this is going to be a weird season. Whenever it ends, if they go on to win the Super Bowl, it's going to be a weird season. And if they lose this weekend, it's going to be a weird season whenever it ends. Mike Clemens is joining us now thanks to the Bay Motel in Green Bay. Mike, I think Sunday, forget the playoffs, forget Division T. I think Sunday to most Packers fans that I've talked to and callers that I've taken has been about more execution errors, sloppy, no attention to detail. And I think people are really starting to look at LaFleur. It's like, when are we going to get this stuff corrected? Because it's cost them games, especially against division rivals. And they're going to go up not against a division rival, but a great team on Sunday. And if they execute poorly, they're going to lose. Their season will be done.
You're watching that Bears game, Grant, and it's like, why does it seem like the offense is moving better with Malik Willis than it did with Jordan Love?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
What's going on here? And stats-wise, that's just a fact. Malik Heath, by the way, that was you got Moss catch that he made for 41 yards on the right sideline. Just simply unbelievable. I still framed it. I took a picture of it. I think we're going to post it later. It's just incredible. Whatever the case, though, Malik was moving the ball. He could run with it. He was handing off. They were blocking for the running backs, and he was connecting passes downfield that Jordan doesn't seem to be hitting on. So, first of all, one of the things I want to talk about is this. I think all fans should be watching this game like you're sitting next to Brian Gutekunst or maybe the new president, Ed Policy, who's going to be taking over this summer. And he's got to be saying, all right, where is this franchise going to be for the 25 season? Because I don't think we've got enough, gas in the tank to get to the Super Bowl this year. And then Christian Watson gone for the season, probably gone for the next year with a torn ACL and extra damage, as the early reports are, to the right knee. That really was your number one receiver, just because of the speed, the way he makes safeties and secondaries back up, the 4.3 speed and all. He was the biggest threat. Jaden Reed has dropped off in terms of, he's a very talented, skilled player, but by his own admission too. He's been having troubles with the drops. He's got to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
So coming out of this Bears loss, Matt LaFleur is a good game manager, but boy, he made some glaring mistakes in this one. The final one came down to when he calls a timeout. Now the Bears are trying to get into field goal range. They just get a gain of about 12 yards to DJ Moore. Then they get called, though, for an illegal formation, which sets them back 5 yards. So now they've got the ball on their own 46. The clock is at 15. Just let it go, Matt.
Yeah.
And he was afraid that they were going to set up, maybe throw something downfield. Frankly, he didn't know what to do in the situation. And so in a moment of panic, he calls a timeout. It stops the clock with 15 seconds. Well, now you got Caleb Williams, the rookie, at his own 46. And here's what Caleb Williams told his guys. And he told DJ Moore, if they give you inside leverage, if they line up on the inside, go out, take a fly route, and I'll hit you down there. If they line up outside to try and keep you from going to the sidelines, take a little glance route, a little slant over the middle. I'll hit you on the inside. But we're just trying to get into field goal range here. And as soon as we get a completion, then we're going to clock it. We'll, line up so we can bounce and clock the game. And then we'll give some time for Cairo Santos. Here's how Caleb Williams handled that huddle and beat Matt LaFleur.
A disappointing loss for sure. I think everybody in the locker room feels
That's
that.
the wrong one. Hold on, Mike. Sorry.
That's Jordan.
Okay,
That's Jordan.
That's Jordan Love. Here's Caleb Williams. That's on me.
Right in the huddle, we call the first play. They call a timeout, and I see obviously why they called a timeout. They had DJ one-on-one with no over-the-top help, and so it's probably not the position that you want to be in, at the end of the game. And so, they call a timeout, and I tell DJ in the huddle, if they press you like that again, you'll run a vertical, a go ball, and then if they get outside leverage, we'll run a glance or a 5-step and snap it off. And told DJ that in the huddle, you just made sure that we were on the same page, so we can go and execute. And then after I told DJ that, told everybody that it's down clock, and then once DJ catches it, we'll have to run up there, clock it, and then put it through the upright, and that's what happened.
Mike, there were a lot of issues with the way that final play was schemed up and called by Jeff Hafley. And Matt LaFleur took a timeout, and I assume they were in conversations. I think the biggest mistake was giving Caleb Williams a simple option. If A, then B. If B, then C. Because if anything, we've seen with Caleb Williams, for all his talent and some of his ability to make throws, he's not processing, he's not seeing, he's not trusting what he's seeing. And they basically gave him a clear cut. If this happens, go here. If that happens, go here. They gave Caleb Williams kind of a roadmap to diagnose and to make a quick and easy play. It couldn't have gone any worse.
Well, and the other thing that was weird about that final pass to DJ Moore, then they clocked the ball and set up for the 51-yard field goal, as to why that defense was called so that the safeties were that far deep. I mean, they were worried about a Hail Mary pass. Well, fine, but really just play to prevent the field goal. I mean, come up closer. Instead, you open up that lane where DJ Moore can get another 5 to 7 yards and get closer into field goal range. And so that was a head scratcher. So when you watch this game on Sunday against the Eagles, just assume it's the last one. And by the way, has there been any more updates today on Jalen Hurts? Is he out of the concussion protocol yet?
Well, I assume, and you would know more about this than me, I would assume they're off today, like the Packers are off. They don't have practice, so I suppose they don't have to designate until tomorrow again, right?
They don't. They're probably keeping it a secret. I just want to know if something like that leaked out, like from an agent or something like that. But otherwise, right now their starting quarterback would be entering the second week of a concussion protocol, and that could flip the game, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the way the whole thing is played out. Whatever the case, one of the things you might want to do just as a fan is start looking around and saying, okay, TJ Slayton, defensive lineman, I think he's at the end of his contract. Are you going to bring this guy back? Are you going to bring back Josh Myers at center because he's at the end of 4 years? And we don't know much about Monk, the kid that they drafted.
Yeah.
But can they save themselves with money at center? Just get a new center in there. We don't know much about Jordan Morgan, although the offensive line coaches talked very highly of him. So you have to make those kinds of roster evaluations because that's what Goody's doing. This is his last chance to make some of these evaluations. It's not like there's guys that he's going to have to decide to resign, but it's not like he's got that many veterans to thin the herd. He's doing okay in that situation. He made 2 great signings this year at running back with Josh Jacobs, and just incredible with Xavier McKinney at safety. But clearly with Watson out, and then maybe these things we just talked about in free agency, you're going to start creating needs that you're going to have to address perhaps in free agency, so you can bring somebody in with at least 3 years experience as opposed to what you can do in the draft. Goody has drafted very well the last 2 years. You got a bunch of starters out of it, but you need another 2 or 3 more, elite players.
Difference makers.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Difference makers to match up what the Lions have been able to put on the field, even though they've been just wiped out by injuries on the defensive side of the ball, and the stuff that the Vikings have got going on just to get out of your division right now. So there's those thoughts. The next thing would be, how the games are run or the plays. And I'm telling you, Matt LaFleur is a good coach.
I agree.
And by the way, he's an emotional coach. And there was a caller today on Bill's show who said, why can't we find, a Dan Campbell guy? I mean, clearly Dan Campbell's got some sort of emotion and motivational thing going on with him and Aaron Glenn as defensive coach and Ben Johnson. You call up very clever plays. And I'm here to tell you, Matt LaFleur is plenty emotional.
Yeah.
The guy is a grinder. He's fully involved, and he's got that locker room. He's got that locker room. Hafley is who there's a lot of people that think that Hafley could be one of these guys offered a head coaching job, or at least interviewed. There's a lot of people in Green Bay that think that. Some of the veteran writers think that. So, but in terms of rah-rah guys, they've got a linebacker, a run defense coordinator named Anthony Campanelli. Guy came up from the Dolphins. I'm here to tell you, there are plenty of yelling coaches, position coaches on the practice field. You're getting plenty of motivation. So don't take that out. But you know what I'm beginning to wonder? Does Matt LaFleur, he first year brings in Robert Saleh for what? Offensive consultant. And then we find out, we happen to glance. Luke Getsy arrived to practice too early. We spotted him.
He was back.
Found out he's been doing it. Yeah. Why is LaFleur bringing in not one but two coaches to help out with offense? Does this mean he needs help? Is Adam Stenovich not the guy at offensive coordinator? Does he needs more help in that department as the head coach? Usually these play caller head coaches don't want that, like McCarthy, right? He wants to take over the plays himself. But I think that's something to watch that, LaFleur's going to have to reevaluate and saying, are we coming up with the right script that fits what Jordan Love can do and scheme these guys open more often, or to call these plays so that, we're building on something rather than just starting games off by pounding the ball with Josh Jacobs and getting the first two touchdowns and then hanging on for the rest of the game.
Lastly, 60 seconds on Christian Watson. I've defended him. I like him. I like what he said. And I think he's had some brutal injury luck. I don't think he drops nearly as many passes as many Packers fans would lead you to believe. I just think with this knee injury now, and it sucks for him, and I hope he goes on to get healthy. But doesn't this almost clarify things for Brian Gutekunst offseason, as if to say, he can't be the guy. We can't give this guy another contract. He can't be our wide receiver number one field stretcher guy. We need to go replace him. Doesn't that actually provide some clarity, as much as it sucks for him and it sucks for the Packers against Philly this weekend?
I think Watson's got another year left, so I don't think that will be the issue. And then they'll give him a second chance to come back. I don't know, Jordy was older, but when he had his torn ACL, things were never the same, and someone suggested the next Odell Beckham Jr. That's true too. You can ruin a talent like that with this kind of a knee injury, but there's no doubt about it. Now you need a number one. You need that. You needed to do that. Hey, they tried 20 years ago with Javon Walker. That's the last guy that they drafted. And his career was never the same after 2 or 3 hot starts. When he had his torn ACL at Ford Field, I was there covering that one. Yeah, that's the need at wide receiver, and a tall, speedy guy to replace Watson is something he's got to address in the draft or in free agency. No question about it. But after that, you have to look at the rest of this thing and saying, why did the Eagles, the thing about the Eagles is that they got better as the season went on. The Packers did not. When December came, they just kind of leveled out, didn't they?
They've won games, but I'm not seeing, Jordan Love's really turned it on, or, I think they've mostly been the same team throughout, with Jordan Love coming and going with injuries. So I don't think you're wrong at all. Mike, I appreciate you so much. Thank you. We'll talk to you tomorrow night on Bill's Huddle.
Talk to you then, Grant. Thank you, pal.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's Mike Clemens. It's appreciated. Thank you for your time. And if you can hear a little bit in the background there, Mike was telling me beforehand, he's like, this is my first day off since Christmas, because the Packers are off today. And first day off since Christmas. Well, yeah, first day off since Christmas. And he said, I'm out to dinner because it's the last night that we have this gift certificate to the supper club. I said, Mike, we don't have to, you don't have to do this, man. Like, we could do it tomorrow. We'll chat on Thursday. And he goes, no, it's the biggest week of the Packers season. I'm committed to doing the show. We need to talk Packers. I'm like, all right, man. If you say so, thank you. So it's Mike Clemens. Follow him on Twitter if you don't, at Mike Clemens NFL. We will wrap up the Wisco Sports Show. Couple minutes next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, wrapping things up. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate Mike Clemens. Appreciate Isaac Trotter. Appreciate everybody. I especially love the second hour of the show because I thought, especially right after 5 o'clock, we took a bunch of calls in a row. We were weaving back and forth perfectly between Badgers basketball and our conversation surrounding the Packers and Matt LaFleur. And I like shows like that where we don't necessarily need to harp on one thing or the other. Last night, that was as much fun as I've had watching a sporting event of one of our teams in a little bit. I'm not going to say in years, but I don't know, in a couple weeks. That game was really fun. They rolled into the rack on a Monday night. That's not a winning recipe. And Kamari McGee and John Blackwell, the guards, Tanjay had a moment or two. And then Stephen Crowell, and I asked Isaac back in the 4 o'clock hour, it's like, please help me better talk about Stephen Crowell. And he basically laid it out. It's like, look, against finesse teams, he's going to give you what you need. Against bigger, more physical teams, you're probably always going to be left wanting. And I understand that. That's fine. But give all the credit in the world to Stephen Crowell last night when the offense was bogged down, and it bogged down especially to start the second half. Neither team could hit a shot. It was very clunky. That was the word Butch was using on the radio broadcast. I was listening on my drive home. Clunky and segmented. And Crowell with a couple cleanup finishes around the rim and a couple great passes really kept him going. So we'll talk more about this tomorrow. We'll really continue and start to hone in on the Eagles and the Packers' actual chances this weekend. Thank you for listening. Always appreciate it.